For decades, he was moved from prison to prison, his identity remaining a secret of the crown. Rumors sparked the interest of writers such as Alexandre Dumas and Voltaire, immortalizing the question that we discussed today: who was the man in the Iron Mask? This is Red Web. Welcome back, Task Force, to another episode of Red Web, the podcast exploring unsolved mysteries, true crime, and the paranormal. I'm your resident mystery lover, Trevor Collins, and joining me hearing this case for the very first time, Alfredo Diaz.
Man, we really are a movie podcast about mysteries. How could we not think about movies on this one? Man, the Iron Mask, I knew as a movie with Leonardo DiCaprio.
He was the king.
King Louis?
Mm-hmm. Great memory.
I knew him from that movie. And then I had some sense of like this is based off of a story to some degree. Don't remember the movie anymore. Don't remember much about it. Just an iron mask on someone's face. That's about it. I'm excited to know like the real life details because we love movies. We love mysteries. And this is the perfect amalgamation of both. So I'm sure a ton of people that are listening to this have seen the movie and, they might know some history about it, or they're like me who have seen it like once or twice randomly. And now we get to learn the actual true events and details.
Yeah, this is a wild case. So I never saw the movie. I've only ever heard the words man in the Iron Mask. And so to me, it's a very interesting question because for sure, this is something that happened. There is factual history here. One would call it a legend, not a myth. And so we're going to explore the history and try to dissect what has been embellished, what is still real, and then, of course, on the other side of it, the theories as to who this person was, why were they in this mask, and what have you. But of course, I would be remiss if we didn't talk about our own movie podcast, Movie Club, available for our patrons over at patreon.com/redweb. It is the number one way to support this podcast. You support us directly, you get exclusive content, deleted scenes, the whole extra podcast every other week, and some shout outs. Let's talk about some of the task force members. We have Jess Rodolfi. We have Call Me Rowlett. From the Buff Scientist crew, we have Hailstorm and Victor Ramirez. And of course, our monthlies, the lovelies from the swamp, our squonks, the familiar names you hear every other month or so, TGYK94G and BWick, to name a few. Thank you all so much for your direct support. And while the memo is still typing, I'm clicking away on the keyboard right now, a little nugget, a little tease of things to come. We're still working on this independent brand, this Phoenix, this beautiful Phoenix you're listening to here in season 2. Red Web is working on a store. We're working on bringing some of that old merch back, plus some new designs. Look towards the end of July. We're aiming for around the 29th, which is a Monday, 2 weeks from now. So mark your calendars. We'll update you in episodes to come. But with business aside, Fredo, let's dive into the background of the man in the Iron Mask. From the late 17th century France, so we're going way back. This is during the reign, as you mentioned, of King Louis XIV. There was legend of a prisoner of unknown origins who was transported from prison to prison under watchful care, always wearing, supposedly, an iron mask. No one knew what crimes this man had committed, and it appeared that he was kept under strict guard. There was no record of who he was before being jailed. This man is like Batman. There is no documented history. He just became and is. Records from a Bastille employee state that in 1698, a new prisoner was transported to the infamous jail and was, quote, always masked and whose name is never pronounced. So just so we know, this is the same Bastille or Bastille you might have heard that was a prison during this time. It became a symbol for the French Revolution, but again, it was a large fortress turned to prison that held on to many political enemies of the monarchy, a lot of highfalutin prisoners, a lot of financially focused prisoners. So you have a good spread of inmates at this particular fortress.
Man, honestly, that's probably like, I feel like going to prison or being locked up is terrible in itself already, but to be locked up and no one know who, or like, you know what I mean? To just be completely anonymous in that space,
Yeah.
I think that's a mental hurdle and challenge all in itself to just be locked away.
It's like solitary confinement on your face.
It really is. Also, like, I have severe allergies. I scratch my face and touch my face way too many times. Regardless of having severe allergies, humans touch their face an absurd amount of times a day. So the amount of just minor inconvenience that would apply to me in an already bad situation, like, you have an itch, how you can't scratch it.
Maybe this person just never got sick again. Didn't touch their face, always had a mask on, but they had a pencil in their pocket. Anytime they got an itch, they just got to sneak it in the side, scratch away like having a cast on your arm.
That needs to be a non-sharpened pencil. I will stab my face way too many times. Then you stab it and you break the tip of the pencil off, and you get a chunk of lead in your skin, and then that's a problem in itself.
At what point does this mask just fuse to you?
Oh,
you know?
Yeah.
Then you're like Dr. Doom, and
yeah.
Now you're a real big enemy.
At that point, just grab a cape.
You'd look pretty cool, I think. So at this time, King Louis XIV sometimes imprisoned people that he just didn't agree with. So we're talking about a lot of individuals here from all walks of life coming to Bastille. And some were held as a preventative measure for investigations. Others were held by their families to force them to, quote, behave. The king even held banned books here. So we're talking about a very interesting location for a lot of kind of things that they don't want people to see, or people or books or things that they're trying to keep behind the scenes.
And just a terrible king in general, a terrible ruler.
True. I don't know much about history, so I'll just agree.
It sounds terrible. This person's locking people up and then stowing books away and stuff.
You got to think about, I was watching House of the Dragon. It just came back.
Oh, House of Them Dragons?
Oh, Hot D, they call it. I'm looking at the royalty, and I'm just like, you know what? There's no one in the land higher than you, and so your ego can run amok. You can just put people in places, hide things away. It's dangerous, I think, for a person to have that much power.
Yeah, you could become a mad king.
Yeah, absolutely.
Is it Aegon, the mad king, they call him?
There were so many Aegons and Rhaegons.
That's what I was like. I'm always like, watch the show. I'm like, is this
the mad king was Aerys?
Aerys the second. Aerys the second Targaryen. Yeah.
Okay, I'm like, which one is the bad king, the worst king or whatever? It's hard.
Yeah. So when thinking about history, a lot of prisoners were transported with masks, whether it be Hannibal Lecter style to prevent people from biting or attacking while they were kind of confined, or simply to create a level of anonymity, hide them away from the public, what have you. It is totally rare that one would stay on the person the entire time, from prison to prison, in transportation and at the prisons. So this implies that this individual might have been somebody that the average person would recognize or know. Or it could, to me, indicate the level of their misdeeds. It's some sort of extra level of punishment to really drive it in. And then also to the other prisoners, that becomes well, I don't want the perma mask, so I'm gonna be a good prisoner. I'm not gonna do the things I shouldn't do because I don't want them to slap an iron mask on me like this guy.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I'll behave. You know, like, seriously, what are you slap that on me and you're gonna stick that on me for years on end? No, whatever you need.
Yeah.
It's terrifying. It's a terrifying thought. It's a terrifying punishment that can loom over you.
I don't need a heavy face, you know?
I didn't even think about that. Yeah, it's probably heavy as hell too.
Yeah. This man in the Iron Mask was imprisoned for 3 decades before his death at Bastille in 1703. And again, it's Bastille in French, but I've always heard it as Bastille because the English pronunciation. So apologies if I go back and forth. But on record, his name was recorded as Marchioli, and his age was documented as, quote, about 45.
This person was locked up for about like 30 years or so?
About 30 years.
And how long of this time were they in the mask?
Essentially the entire time. That's what the rumor says.
Yeah, hell no. Yeah, no. And me,
right?
There's no way.
45 years old at death-ish, wearing a mask for 3 decades, means you were imprisoned as like a 15-ish year old. Mask is on 3/4 of your life.
That's
Or
no.
2/3 of your life.
Yeah, I'm good. Like, you can end me.
That's a lot.
That's unbearable.
Also, what did this teenager do? I'm so excited to get into the potential who's of
Yeah,
this.
that's what I want to know. To lock up someone that young for so long is a little wild. To me, it feels like it needs to be very personal at that point.
Yeah. Or yes, I think your instincts are onto something there, and I'm excited to explore more. But this man in the Iron Mask had been at Bastille since September 18th, 1698, and before that, records are unclear due to the lack of a name, but there are records that historians believe indicate his movement. Again, this is the earliest record of him being at Bastille, but we know for about 30 years he had been kind of moved from prison to prison. And after his death, it is said that his clothes were burned at dawn and that his cell was cleaned immediately. One of the very first to write about the man in the Iron Mask was writer and philosopher Voltaire. Born as François-Marie Arouet, he took on the name as Voltaire upon his imprisonment at Bastille in 1718. So, I don't know if you've heard of Voltaire. He was a very interesting writer, nonfiction, fiction, philosophy, all sorts of things. I had no idea that he shared, essentially, a prison with the man in the Iron Mask. He came years after he passed, but it gave him an inside view into the rumors.
Oh.
And as an aside, by the way, on Voltaire, I was looking up about the guy when we were doing the research, and there's a few origins for his name because, of course, he was born as François-Marie, and a popular theory is that it was an anagram for the Latinized version of his last name, which was Erovet Lee, which then removed around Voldemort style becomes Voltaire. Little fun fact.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of surprising to me that, because it seems like they went to such great lengths to hide the identity of this person, let them in a mask for the majority of their life, but then also to stick someone with him, you know?
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a little like, I don't know. It's I wouldn't expect it. I don't expect it.
So someone wasn't stuck in there with him. I should make it clearer. So he passed away in 1703, and Voltaire was in there in 1715. So all I'm trying to say is it's interesting to hear a very historical figure. A lot of important people, I guess, went through this prison.
Like followed in the path in terms of the place.
Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. So while incarcerated, Voltaire had heard about the rumors of this iron-faced prisoner, though when writing about it, there are a few discrepancies. He claimed that the man wore the Iron Mask since at least 1661. This would be 37 years prior to the earliest documented year of 1698, which, again, is still within that realm of 3 decades, but Voltaire, you're going to see, is kind of lengthening the timeline. 1661 would also be 42 years prior to his death in 1703. So, that would make him a 3-year-old child prisoner if his death at 45-ish was accurate. So more on this kind of age timeline thing in the theories, but immediately Voltaire's writings are starting to kind of lean on a few rumors that we'll explore later, but it's changing the timeline a little bit.
Okay.
So Voltaire has been credited as one of the 2 writers who propagated the legend of the man in the Iron Mask, but the story was popularized even more by writer Alexandre Dumas, who wrote a fictionalized depiction of the man in the Iron Mask in 1850. If you recognize that name, you might know his other writings. He also wrote The Three Musketeers or The Count of Monte Cristo.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense then.
Some very, very famous books. Of course, The Man in the Iron Mask is another famous story that then became a movie, and here we are talking about it to this day. So I think you can give it to at least both of these 2 for making it an immortal story.
Which one had Antonio Banderas? Was that Zorro?
That was Zorro.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, just making sure.
Or Spy Kids.
Spy.
Yeah.
Oh no, the thumb.
My favorite Alexandre Dumas story, Le Spy Kids. Now, according to historian Paul Sanino, quote, he only occasionally wore the mask, and that when he did wear a mask, it was velvet, not iron, end quote. In any case, this story still stands out because there aren't any records describing a prisoner being forced to constantly wear a mask. So, what are the rumors? What is fact? What is fiction here? It's very interesting. but I want to talk about the prison records, talking about a man by the name of Eustache Dauger. This is a very intriguing person, and historians, I'll kind of get ahead of the theories, historians mostly agree that this was the identity of the man in the Iron Mask. And we'll talk about that and talk about why before we dive into the theories of the other potential identities that are equally, if not more, fascinating. There's so many really compelling angles on this story. So these prison records I was talking about, they come from officials at Bastille, and they describe Dauger as wearing, quote, a mask of black velvet. There's a letter that was dated July 19th, 1669, from the king's minister, Marquis de Louvois, stating that an Eustache Dauger was, quote, only a valet. Sounds like poetry, but basically saying that this man was a personal servant. If you look up the definition of valet, it's like a man that helps another man, I guess. And that this Eustache Dauger would be soon coming to Pignerol, which is, I believe, a prison. It's one of the first prisons that he was going to. Again, he was kind of bouncing from prison to prison. Now, there's another man with an equally difficult name to pronounce, Benin d'Auvergne du Saint-Marc. He was a prison governor there and a former musketeer. Musketeers, just unlike the story or anything like that.
Say Three Musketeers?
No, he wasn't one of the three. So musketeers in this case are essentially just high-ranking royal guard. Now, interestingly, Dauger's name was written in a different handwriting than the rest of the letter, suggesting to me that the name might be either a pseudonym or that the letter was written with a blank for the name and that somebody else kind of came in, as if this was some sort of boilerplate letter and then they just kind of fill in the name. But the minister instructed Saint-Marc to lock Dauger in a cell behind multiple doors so no one could hear him, and to kill him if he spoke of anything beyond his immediate needs. The letter did not include any reason for his imprisonment.
That is, I'm so curious to find out what this person did to be pushed to this degree of punishment.
It is very interesting because in the letter, again, Marquis de Louvois says he's only a valet, but at the same time, he's treating them like this influential, high-profile, knows too much, could corrupt any prisoner he could talk to kind of guy. So stick him behind a bunch of doors.
It just makes it seem like he's more than a valet.
100%. And that's where a lot of theories kind of grow.
Yeah, such huge lengths to keep this person locked up, not talking to anybody. It is absurd the amount of resources that are being put. I mean, then again, the king sounds kind of wild, so it could be like a personal vendetta that the king has against this person.
That is an entirely possible angle. I'm glad you said that, because what stood out to me, and we'll come back to harvest these fruits in the theories section, is that this is coming from the king's minister. Clearly, the king either knows this person directly or at least his close ensemble, I don't know what the king's group is called.
Yeah.
His confidants would know of this person. So it was enough for his own minister to write a letter and send it off and say, hey, keep an eye on this guy. And by the way, I'm getting ahead of myself a little here, but Benin d'Auvergne, the prison governor, follows him now for the rest of his time. While he bounces from prison to prison, Saint-Marc goes with him to continue specifically overwatching him in addition to the prison that he's at. So it feels a little hot button prisoner here.
Yeah, it just feels so extreme. Like that this person is legit just locked down for the rest of their life.
Absolutely. So while at Pignerol, Dauger appeared to continue his work as a valet for Nicolas Fouquet, so another prisoner and a former superintendent of finances to the king. So we have another prisoner from the king, somebody from the king's court, and he's now helping somebody within the confines of the prison, continuing his work as a valet perhaps. And as such, he then shared a cell with Fouquet and was bound to secrecy to him. Fouquet had another servant, so Dauger was only allowed to act as a valet when the other one was not around, so he could not have interaction with anybody else. And interestingly, after Fouquet's death, a hole between Fouquet's wall and another prisoner was found. Basically, some sort of hole they carved into to either maybe share secrets or interact with one another. Now, believing this was used to communicate, Dauger and the other prisoner were then made to share a cell, saying, okay, fine. There's possibility that Dauger did talk to somebody other than Fouquet. Therefore, just force them to stay together so we know it's a known entity. Again, keeping very close supervision on this innocuous prisoner, this valet.
Yeah, and in turn too, it just feels like everyone else that is on detail for this prisoner is on just their own hell and lockdown. They're like attached to this person, and like they also too have to go where this person goes and do with this. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I might have had it the other way around, because I think actually the way it was is that, I'll just give it in a hard English accent, Saint-Mars was transferred to other prisons as part of his job, and he himself brought Dauger with him. So Dauger, on paper, is actually moving from prison to prison. It's not exactly clear why, other than the idea that maybe he just wanted to give very specific supervision. Maybe my own theory is that the king or the court told him who this person was. He was more than a valet, and so we need you to keep a close eye on it because we can't have too many people knowing this truth.
So that's even more confusing, because like, why not keep them locked into one place? Even if this person is like really good at watching over someone, if this person's bouncing around like crazy, to attach him to this person, it just feels like there's so many points of failure or escape possibilities. Yeah. Like, instead of just, you're here and you stay here and there's no way out. It's like, we're transferring you here, moving you here. Like, you're tied to hip to this person. And
maybe it just, we don't know exactly why Saint-Marc was like moving around so much, or, you know, maybe, I don't know. I don't know if it was job opportunities or moving or what have you, but either way, it was them moving that brought this prisoner around. And so far, it lines up pretty well with the Man in the Iron Mask. And what's interesting is that during travel time between prisons, Dauger was reportedly transported in a chair wrapped tightly with cloth. Again, this is reported, so we're getting a little closer to rumor territory. But either way, Saint-Marc, to give it a fifth pronunciation, I'm sorry, French listeners, Saint-Mars was appointed as a governor of Bastille in 1698, bringing the Man in the Iron Mask with him. Basically, this lines up really well. This actual guy traveling around, having Dauger, another actual guy, attached to him at the hip, lines up with the timeline of this mysterious Man in the Iron Mask showing up at Bastille. And so this is why a lot of historians kind of subscribe to it being Eustache Dauger. But why? What did he know? Exactly. What was his actual identity beyond being a valet? It's really hard to say.
Like, how did he piss off the king and to this extent?
Yeah. And also, just a little nugget of insight. When he was moved here, he was fed by the second in command, and he had a furnished room. And so he's like a prisoner who can't say anything because he's in high lockdown, but he also lives a slightly more luxurious life in prison, but also don't let him see, like, his face see daylight. It's a very compelling situation.
It's a very weird situation. Because putting a person, like, don't speak unless, you know, if they speak beyond asking for what needs that they have, kill them. Put them in a mask. They can't see anyone. They can't see daylight. But, you know, let them live a little lavishly.
Yeah,
it sounds like such a personal vendetta, and then to be able to give them some comfort doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. So, again, I don't want to blur the lines too much. That's Eustache Dauger. He's got his furnished room and good food. But there's a lot of things lining up with this mysterious Man in the Iron Mask. But with that said, what really makes this topic shine are the other theories. And it's a possibility that some of these theories can actually overlap with the idea of Eustache Dauger to answer for their deeper identity beyond being a valet. Why imprison and keep a close watch, but also give them a little bit of luxury? I'm so excited to talk about this first one, especially because before researching this, I honestly hadn't heard this particular theory. This episode of Red Web is sponsored by BetterHelp. Comparison is the thief of joy, and it's easy to envy other people's lives. It might look like they have it all together on their Instagram when you scroll through their social media, but in reality, They probably don't. I know me. You know you. We're all just humans, you know what I mean? Therapy can help you focus on what you want instead of what others have or what they showcase what they have, so you can start living your best life. Here's what I like about the service in particular. It is entry-level friendly. I have experienced a lot of daunt when it comes to therapy and finding the right therapist, and BetterHelp is there to help kind of bridge that gap. Get your foot in the water so you can get comfortable with finding that person and comfortable with therapy. Therapy is helpful for learning positive coping skills and how to set boundaries, empowering you to be the best version of yourself. If you're thinking about starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. All you have to do is fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with a licensed therapist, and you can switch therapists at any time for no additional charge. Stop comparing and start focusing with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/redweb to get 10% off your first month. That's BetterHelp, HELP.com/redweb. And this one comes from Voltaire. He introduced the most famous theory about the man in the Iron Mask. He believed that this man must be the older brother of King Louis XIV. Others think that it actually might have been a twin brother. From rumors he had heard, the man was actually in his 60s at the time of death, which was kind of near the age of King Louis XIV at that time. In fact, Louis XIV would have been about 60 years old in 1703 when the prisoner died. This, combined with the aforementioned rumors of being in prison since 1661, should increase the age of imprisonment from the original 3-year-old child prisoner to actually around 21 years old, if you take for fact what Voltaire is laying down here.
Interesting, okay.
So this would put him about 63 at death, while the king was at 60 when this prisoner died.
So, yeah, very similar to age. A lot more similar than I thought it would be.
Yeah. And we'll talk about the wrinkles, but as the story goes, this brother was the illegitimate son of Queen Anne and Cardinal Mazarin. Interestingly, Mazarin comes up again in another theory later on, so we'll earmark him, but another version of this theory is that Louis XIV was actually the illegitimate son himself, and the brother was jailed to keep the secret.
Oh my God, that's juicy as hell.
Now, this is some Game of Thrones stuff.
That's very much, yeah.
Absolutely.
That is absurdly wild in terms of a story.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that would show reason as to why there was some compassion, you know, like with the living situation.
But not enough compassion to just not do it. I'm just kind of like,
oh, for sure.
You're going to stick him in a mask for life until he's killed 30 years later. I'm thinking Game of Thrones style. Why not just, I'm sorry, behead the guy in a cold, quiet room and never talk about him again? Because clearly if he's in prison and taken away anonymously, that person's essentially disappearing. So you might as well just actually disappear him?
Yeah, I guess it's one thing to go to such extremes to do something like this, and it's another to completely, it's like to wipe them off the face of the planet, essentially.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right. Which to me is a point in the column.
Yeah, it takes another level of someone, like a person to kill the brother. Like you can lock them up and maybe feel like you could sleep at night, make up whatever excuse, but killing them all together is a whole other level.
I agree. I think that that's a point in the column for maybe this is a sibling, because even if you want to hide some secrets, maybe you don't want to kill your brother or twin or what have you.
Yeah, there's that level of compassion.
Yeah. Now the twins angle is slightly different, but still very similar. It's that the twins might have created a situation where choosing the heir to the throne was more difficult than it might have wanted to be. Or I don't know if this has happened in other, if there's precedence for this, but if there's literally twins and that was meant to be the heir, how do you choose between the two? Does that create strife? And therefore you have to kind of pick one to pull away from the picture and then pretend that the king was just a single child. And then you kind of allow this other child to grow up anonymously among prisons. So you give them comfort because they didn't do anything, but you don't want to, it's a little sticky.
Yeah, I never really thought about that. If you have twins, then who's the heir?
Yeah.
It's
well, I was born 2 minutes earlier. Well, okay.
And then also you need the buy-in from the people. So, how do you know what I mean? How do the people react to something like that?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. Christian, I'm very curious if you don't mind kind of looking into the twin heir kind of conversation, if that's ever happened, because that's a compelling angle, you know? Imagine you flash forward in time and you have a 40-year-old king and his 40-year-old brother is kind of going, man, it should have been me. Is that a political issue? Could that person turncoat? Is like, I don't know. Does that create assassination concerns? All that sort of stuff.
Looks like it was basically whoever came out first was the one to be named the heir, because they're technically older.
That's what I would think, right? Which twin popped out first?
You're like, no, not that one. You just push back in.
Yeah.
I want the other one.
Yeah. Damn. Even though I really think it should be just at that point, who is best fit to be the heir, to be the king. The first person, the first son or the first child that popped out could just not want to do that.
True.
And so, okay, is it because they were 2 minutes earlier? They're going to be forced into that.
Yeah. Christian, another one, just while I'm thinking on things. At what age did King Louis XIV take the throne? Because
it seemed like it was young.
It seemed young. And if my math is mathing, based on Voltaire, he could have been in prison at 21, but also maybe at 3. And then the other timeline is kind of saying at 15-ish.
Yeah.
Looks like Louis XIV took the throne at the age of 4 years old.
Oh my God, he could have been a 3-year-old prisoner. They're like, we got to pick one of these boys.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Okay. What a unique story that is.
Mm-hmm.
Also, come on, how do you put, I'm sure they have, there's a whole this person makes choices until they're old enough, but, for the political facing and everything like that, this 4-year-old is king.
Yeah, I don't know about all that. I don't know, man. So coming back to Voltaire and his theory. So he believed that the only reason possible on the table that someone would need to be masked 24/7, and Fredo, I think you kind of hinted at this, was because they would be immediately recognizable to anyone, seeing them transport, seeing them in prison, etc. And who is more recognizable in this era without photography than the king?
But also, why move him around like crazy, though?
I think it's because there was, and again, this is kind of extrapolating the idea that the prison governor, that Saint Mars, was the only person who knew the truth, and they didn't want that truth to spread, so they said, well, whatever. If he's moving, you got to move the prisoner with him. And he's like, well, I don't want to stay at this prison just because I have to look over this guy, so he's coming with me,
Yeah, it's just interesting to just be like, this is the best qualified, and this is, you'll follow this person now.
Yeah. Now, I can hear some of the task force thinking, well, there's a wrinkle here. Or maybe I'm pulling it out of thin air. I feel like there's a wrinkle here. Because in reality, and I learned this recently, the king would be known mostly by descriptors rather than his actual likeness. It would be actually very unlikely for a commoner to know exactly what the king looked like other than what they are described as. Sure, you can get portraits around or you can get sculptured busts strewn about the country, but a lot of people had never heard the king or seen the king. In fact, Fredo, our voices right now are probably hitting more ears than King Louis XIV's voice ever hit in his whole life, which is really interesting to think about.
What?
Yeah.
I guess so. I don't know. He doesn't just walk out onto a platform and address the masses.
Yeah, but that's not as many people as you'd think. And getting to the city, France is a big enough country, especially in the 17th century. So getting around was actually very difficult too. It's kind of weird to wrap my mind around, but there is still some caution to take, because if you're going to these prisons where you have prisoners from the court or prisoners that might actually know the king, then it is worth having somebody who, again, under the guise of this theory, it could be a twin. So it could look like the king, or it could look similar to the king, if not a twin, like a brother. And so all it takes is one person to recognize the king and then go, wait a minute, why are you here? Oh, wait, you're the actual king. That must be an imposter. And then suddenly you have a bunch of mess.
True. I never really thought about that. Because it was so far back then that through technology, we're possibly able to reach more people, or most likely.
Absolutely. Now, another reason why Voltaire believed the man may have been royal was because, according to yet another rumor, the man appeared to get special meals and could play instruments. Again, we talked about having Eustache d'Auger having kind of a furnished prison with some good food. This kind of aligns those two. But another wrinkle on this is that he worked as a valet in prison to a man who was subservient to the crown. And to me, that is kind of unlikely that a member of the royal family, even if they're disowned and imprisoned, would then kind of work beneath somebody else who they themselves also used to work for the crown. So I don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Because you give them, because why put them to work in the first place?
Right.
If they are of royalty.
Yeah. Regardless of that wrinkle there, on the whole, historians do not subscribe to this theory, as fascinating as it is. It could be exactly that. A fascinating story, with rumors shaped by a writer named Voltaire to bring more intrigue to the legend. And the theory itself leans on three rumors, right? You have one, age 60 or 60s, not 45-ish, a much earlier imprisonment than documented, eating well, playing an instrument, etc. And then on top of that, you have mostly circumstantial evidence that, again, lines up once you move with some of these assumptions. But is it a case where a prolific writer of both fiction and nonfiction found an intriguing rumor in prison and built it into something else? And it became so fascinating because it revolved around the king that it stuck for time, right?
I would say so. Yeah. I mean, I don't live there, and during those times, there's less things to draw your attention, right?
Mm-hmm.
Less saturation in entertainment and whatnot. Fanciful stories were that of huge entertainment. So why not try and capitalize on something that sounds so grand, even if it's just rumors?
Absolutely. Now, moving on to the next theory, a more likely suspect is another imprisoned minister at Pignerol. This would be Count Ercole Antonio Mattioli. Mattioli was imprisoned for revealing secret information he was entrusted with regarding the negotiations on the Treaties of Peace of Nijmegen in 1678, thus betraying the king. So the king had him quickly imprisoned and may not have wanted him to speak regarding anything else, thereby sticking him in a mask to save him from spilling any other secrets, especially during this Franco-Dutch war negotiation that was happening. It was a very politically wrought time, and the king would not want any of those secrets spilling to anybody else.
I could see that. Look, you got secrets, you want to keep it under wraps. I mean, the smart thing to do at that point, and as evil as it is just to get rid of the person, because then you always risk having secrets come out. But at
this point, I got to come back to the beheading part, though.
Yeah.
This isn't a family member. This is a loose lips sink ships. We're in the 17th century, and you're King Louis XIV. Off with your head.
Yeah. I mean, but also, like, I guess
I'd be a terrible king, by the way.
Well, yeah, it's in the mindset of being a terrible person is what you're putting yourself in.
Right.
And, like, but also, who knows how, like, essentially the culture was back then, as if it's rumors, do people really even act on it? Does it really mean anything?
True. 100%.
How many people does it actually reach?
That's a great point, actually, because by imprisoning the person, you're going, this person talks, I'm punishing them. But what they said may or may not be valid. If I behead them, you might take it as fact, and thereby the rumors are slipped and you might believe the rumors now. But
exactly. So it's just very interesting because it's like, well, it's such a different time period. So who's to say that, like, it really didn't matter if rumors got out? Maybe rumors didn't carry as much weight.
Yeah, that's a great point. Now, I want to come back to something we briefly mentioned before, the name Marchioli. This was the name written down at the death of the prisoner, the man in the iron mask. This is what was documented as his identity, and nothing really attaches to this, maybe except for Mattioli, as the theory goes. There is no other Marchioli that we can find, at least in our research this week, but as this theory goes, it sounds eerily similar to Mattioli, and the theory kind of subscribes to the idea that maybe it was a misspelling, or someone that heard the name finally revealed and wrote it down wrong because they just maybe misheard the name in some way, didn't know how to spell it, or they just gave a very slightly different pseudonym. It's hard to say. Descendants of the royal family reportedly claim that the prisoner was an Italian nobleman, which Mattioli was. This is one of the first Italians we're actually talking about. And so this is the first time actually I've heard that it could have been an Italian versus the other theories. However, records indicate that Mattioli likely died at Sainte Marguerite prison, whereas Dauger, who spent some time there in the past, had moved to another prison before dying at Bastille. So, yes, Mattioli and Dauger and or this Man in the Iron Mask kind of shared a history, both having gone to the same prison. Mattioli met his end here, where the Man in the Iron Mask did not. However, if Voltaire's description of the man was true, Mattioli becomes a more likely suspect purely from an age standpoint, because by the time he died, he was approaching 60, and so that would line up, despite being at a different prison, would line up with what Voltaire was saying, that the Man in the Iron Mask was actually in his 60s when he died, not 45. So it gets a little hairy.
Yeah, but also who's to say that the person wasn't just switched at any point in time? Just random other theory.
Man, that's true. What if the mask just got like transported from prison to prison and slopped on somebody else?
Yeah.
And you just played like people shuffle, and so you never knew.
Yeah. It just makes it so much more complicated.
Whoa. That's interesting. Because then you're like, well, maybe all of these identities are accurate, but as time went on, it became someone else. Interesting. Moving back to Paul Sonnino, the historian we mentioned earlier, he himself has a theory specifically about Dauger's life as a valet before prison. So I'm excited that we can dive a little bit more into Eustache Dauger because, as historians agree, this seems like a very likely candidate with a lot of things lining up. So Sonnino believes Dauger was his real name, though others still kind of disagree on that fact. And according to Sonnino, he uncovered evidence that Dauger was a valet to Cardinal Mazarin, and he was actually the chief minister to the king. So Sonnino's theory essentially revolves around yet another theory, that the cardinal was stealing money and acting as kind of a loan shark, and that apparently Dauger found out about that and revealed his secret. And so then the cardinal, on behalf of the king, says, "You found me out, I'm going to get rid of you, but not in the violent way because I can't, so I'm going to send this letter, have you imprisoned, have you locked away in a way that you can't tell anybody because I won't let you tell my secret. And I'm going to stick you in a mask to really go above and beyond. I'm going to tell the prisoner guards to say if he talks, kill him." So far, it kind of works out, but again, it's a theory built on a theory.
Right. But that person would be high enough to have some pull, and you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
To lock them away.
Absolutely.
Because it'd have to be someone high enough in power, because there's a lot of pull, a lot of resources contributing to this.
Yeah. What's interesting about this angle is kind of coming back to the letter we talked about that was dated 1669. So again, that letter said that, oh, this guy's just a valet, don't even think about him, but also give him a lot of protection, stick him behind a bunch of doors, and the name was written in a different font. So to me, I'm kind of filling in some gaps here. I'm curious if this theory is accurate. The cardinal scooping some money off the top, doing some illegal loan shark activities. This guy, whoever he is, finds out, and the cardinal goes, "Well, I want you punished. I want another minister to write this letter. I don't know what your name is, but I'll find out and then add it later." What if that's why the name is written differently? What if that's why this otherwise innocuous valet got such heavy treatment, was because the cardinal was doing some stuff behind the scenes that he didn't want out?
But also, I just feel like that kind of puts away the whole like tie that we were talking about earlier between like possibly a twin or a relative, something like that in that sense. So why wouldn't the cardinal just get rid of that person? It seems like,
I mean, that's, yeah,
such a big hassle, and you don't have any type of emotional ties.
Yeah, that's another great point. Maybe the cardinal, by doing something as messy as, well, I guess one, maybe the cardinal didn't have the power to do that. And then two, maybe if the cardinal did do something like that, the king would find out and say, "Well, why'd you kill that guy? I need an answer." And he's like, "Oh, well, just cuz." And maybe the cardinal would have played his hand. Again, I'm not sure. But we are again in a very interesting time because France is kind of experiencing the Franco-Dutch War, and at this time they're also trying to negotiate England joining in on their side. And so regardless of the theory you come after, they're in a very sensitive time politically speaking. And so that's what's fueling a lot of these theories, is that any secret coming out about the crown, whether it be the king, the cardinal, or anybody else, threatens the either ongoing war or the bid to get England on their side. And so again, that doesn't have to validate this particular theory, but it is a very interesting motivation to kind of add color to some of these theories.
Yeah, I mean, that could definitely make sense, especially if it's someone that's a relative or someone of importance. Of just like, look, this is a time where we can't have anything coming out, so we're gonna lock you up. And yeah, I mean, it does validate some of the resources that are being spent. It can also validate other theories as well.
Yeah. I think what's interesting about this particular one is that it still centers around Doge. It tries to offer a little bit more insight as to why this regular guy, it seems, this valet, as we keep saying, was put into a very interesting confinement and then traveled around a bunch with a mask on. It's just like, on the surface, regardless of who the prisoner was, it's such a fascinating mystery.
It is. It's just so many resources to a person that we don't quite know the identity of. And
absolutely,
even then, we just don't know what they did. And obviously, they're either of some importance or have done something that could be perceived as heinous enough where, so much time and dedication to punish this person or keep this person alive. Like, it's not all for nothing,
And so, of course, there's this desire to know who this mysterious person was, fueling all these theories. And I think nothing would be more upsetting than to find out that, as we're going to discuss in this next theory, that this person might have been no one. Someone of little to no importance whatsoever and of no intrigue.
So that would be wild. Because, like, why? I just don't... There's so much here for it to be no one.
I would agree.
And also, like, is there other people, like like an absurd amount of other people that are also getting this form of punishment? Like, was it you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a great point. It is a unique punishment because we don't have other cases where somebody else is wearing a mask, unless they're all conflated, like you said, as one person.
Yep.
It is unique to punish this one person, especially if it was a nobody. But let's explore that angle. Because, interestingly, if it was somebody, French society certainly didn't notice them going missing. And so that was kind of pointed out by writer John Noon, that the original instructions here were to make sure no one heard this man in the iron mask. Not that no one saw him, that no one heard him. So it is possible that he simply knew information that he shouldn't have, though exactly what is clearly still up for debate. The man in the iron mask appeared to be connected to multiple financial ministers, so he may have just simply known too much during a politically hot time. It's also been argued that Saint Marc, the prison governor who oversaw the man the entire time, the man kind of followed him as he moved prisons, added the permanent mask as a way to appear more important because he's the guy at the top of the prison. And by having one fall guy be the masked prisoner, he can maybe stoke fear and control into the other prisoners. Who knows?
I mean, sure, yeah, I could, yeah, for sure. But it's just such an extreme. But then why make them feel, I don't know, like, let them play music and have them eat different foods or stay in different places, whatnot. You know what I mean?
What if that's the trade-off where he's like, all right, listen, guy, you and I are going to have a deal. I'm going to give you a mask. It's velvet. It's soft. Feels good on the skin. And no one will know who you are. And that's going to stoke fear on people. We're going to say it's iron. And then as you helping me empower my control, I'll give you a couple of biscuits, and a loot. I mean, that would motivate me.
Yeah, the biscuits specifically would motivate Trevor. You're like, dude, you're throwing in another half of a biscuit. I'm all right.
Yeah, dude, and you would be
talking about.
You'd be so impressed with how terribly I'd play the lute after 30 years.
Oh,
Still not know a single song.
It's just funny to be like, I mean, what kind of biscuits we talking about?
Yeah, right. It's like, what kind of? You got some jam in there, some butters, salted butter.
Okay.
I think this theory is one of those ones that tries to get a little bit more vague so it can cast a wider net. Obviously, each of the more specific theories tries to address some motivation, some of the knowledge that might have been in play. But either way, what's so interesting to me is that Saint-Marc, in a letter, wrote the following, quote, "Everyone tries to guess who my prisoner might be," end quote. So it seems that even at the time, he and the people around him were aware of the rumors, and maybe that was just part of it. Maybe this mystique, this control was just part of it, and there was nothing really else deeper to look at. I don't know.
That's nuts. If that's like, you know what I mean? Essentially, just it was all for like flair and attention.
Well, it certainly kept him in the history books, that's for sure.
It really did, though.
Yeah. I don't know. I love the intrigue of it being King Louis's brother. I love it being a twin.
Yeah, that's a very interesting take.
Yeah, it's a very juicy story. Unfortunately, it leans on a few rumors and some circumstantial evidence, and maybe that's kind of just Voltaire's angle to make it more compelling. But otherwise, I would kind of have to agree with historians that Eustache Dauger, his timeline kind of lines up pretty well, though the deeper answers as to what he knew, why he was imprisoned, all of that is still kind of up for grabs. We at least maybe know the identity. There's still some questions that remain. But golly, is this a fascinating one with so many more angles and theories than I would have expected.
Yeah, it's a wild one. Even then, like, our theory we were thinking about where it's just a trading of people within the mask. Or, or if a handful of the people we talked about were at some point in the mask. It's just a wild thought.
Yeah. And they never wash it either. So the next guy that gets it, he's like, oh, it's still wet. Oh, there's a sneeze spot in here.
I can smell him.
Anyway, back to my Luton biscuits.
Yeah. I see these awesome biscuits I got paid to do this for.
Well, when we started this, I know you clearly indicated your reluctance for any sort of iron mask situation. Velvet's a different story.
Yeah.
But if you were getting a little bit of special treatment and this was like the kind of payment you had to make and you were already in prison, are you making that deal?
For a velvet mask?
Metal mask.
No, hell no, not for a metal mask.
No. Dang.
No. Velvet? All right, we're talking. All right.
Could have some yoked shoulders though.
That's true. I could
your neck
have
as thick as your head.
Some insane traps.
Yeah.
Not worth it. Not for a metal mask. Is so absurdly unpainful.
Yeah. No, I'm with you on that. And velvet, it's going to get rancid over time and wear. This nasty stuff. But this has been the story that has enamored historians, storytellers for centuries now. The Man in the Iron Mask, a question that will probably outlive us long into the future, but a fascinating story made probably more prolific by the writers Alexandre Dumas and Voltaire, but also in a funny kind of way, ironically, probably just clouded the air a little bit more, making it even harder to figure out factually what the real story and the real identity behind the mask is.
Yeah, we'll never know. They just kept it so locked down. I mean, but with everything that they were trying to do, they succeeded.
Absolutely. But a fascinating case. These kind of ones that kiss on history just a little bit, I love. Because I love when you can learn a little bit about history and how it motivates the unknown. Those are just my two little sweet spots.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, with that said, Fredo, this has been another mystery. Task Force, thank you all so much for your ongoing support over on patreon.com/redweb. Get some deleted scenes, some bonus content, the movie podcast, Movie Club. We also put out outlines and all sort of exclusive stuff to thank you for your direct support of this show. And again, small tease, mark that calendar, July 29th, 2 weeks from the release of this episode. We're hoping to launch our merch store so you can support Red Web in a whole new way here in season 2. But with that, Fredo, I will see you back here next Monday for yet another mystery.
Bye, everyone.